Here's Brody Brazil.
So last year, the NBA and their Players Association came together for a new collective bargaining agreement. And part of it sets out a brand new rule, which is very unprecedented across professional sports. People call it the 65-game rule. And again, I won't fault you if this is all new to you because, well, it's new to the NBA as well. But the 65-game rule is coming with some controversy. And there's more to it than you might even expect, but first let me spell out what this new rule is. If you play fewer than 65 games in an NBA regular season, you as a player are not eligible for the Most Valuable Player Award, the Defensive Player of the Year Award, the Most Improved Player of the Year Award. You're also not eligible for the All-NBA or All-Defensive teams. Some other individual awards, they're still on the table for you no matter how many games you play. Rookie of the Year, Sixth Man of the Year, and All-Rookie teams. Those are three categories that are not impacted by this new rule. Again, no other pro sport, as far as I understand, has anything like this in their CBA. But there's more. There's fine print here. For a game to count towards the 65-game tally, the player must have logged a minimum of 20 minutes in all of those 65 games. But 2 instances of logging fewer than 20 minutes are allowed if the player has played at least 15 minutes in those games. You're sick, you're not feeling well, the game dictates it, whatever. There's 2 gimmies in there that a player can have so long as they log 15 other minutes of basketball. A player can also be eligible if he's played 62 to 64 games, but only if he suffers, and this is gruesome, a season-ending injury thereafter. So there are some caveats, but again, it's not just a player getting in the basketball game and, oh, that counts. You got to play 20 minutes for it to count as one of those 65 games. Now, the origins of this. Load management is the other side of this. NBA teams and players, a lot more in recent years and decades, they've started to do load management of their players on road trips and especially back-to-back games. Right? We're looking at the schedule. We're playing 3 games in 4 nights. All right. Our superstar, he's going to sit out that middle game to kind of buy some time in between, prevent an injury, rest from an injury that they're playing through, try to gain stamina for the rest of the season or the postseason, right? There's a lot of reasons why you would do load management, but the increase of it has caught everybody's attention. And it's also been kind of a sticking point for TV networks, which we'll get into as well here in just a second. Interestingly enough, if you look at a graph of the 2 road cities where players have their load managed the most, it's Utah and Denver, which makes a ton of sense. The altitude, right? You're huffing and puffing. You don't have as much oxygen as you need in Salt Lake City or in Colorado. So those are the 2 most managed road cities for load management of NBA players. After that, after those 2 cities, there's no real rhyme or reason or correlation of when and where players sit out. So it's not really an unfair market type thing, although if you're playing against the Jazz or you're playing against the Nuggets, maybe those 2 teams benefit the most by not going up against opposing team superstars, but maybe their fans lose out on not getting to see the matchups and the road players that they want to see. And that's my next point here. This is kind of the complaint of fans and TV viewers and the national networks. They're probably the most impacted by load management situations. Oh man, we've been looking forward to team A and B getting together so that we can see player X and Y go head to head. And that makes sense, and I understand it, and I fully realize a lot of people are paying a lot of money for really good tickets for the matchup they so desperately wanted to see, and then the morning of the game, scrolling on Twitter, what? He's not playing? There go my tickets, and there go the value of my tickets. I understand that. I also understand that the league and its television partners have a lot of influence, and they don't like to see the fact that we just made promos and commercials and this game and this matchup and these 2, which we don't get to see very often, and now it's not going to happen. Is that player even hurt? Are they injured or are they hurting? Can they play through this? Do we really need to do this? What's the value of it? But let me also point this out. The scheduling of the NBA, I also feel like has changed. Did they ever do this many back-to-backs? I mean, the Warriors this season alone have a league-high 17 back-to-back sequences. 17 times 2, 34. 34 of 82 regular season games this year are part of a back-to-back, which sometimes include travel. Obviously, you'd prefer staying home, and it's a less taxing situation. But travel with a back-to-back? That means 41% of the Warriors' regular season games this year are either the first or second half of a back-to-back. And obviously, too, back-to-backs make the 3 games in 4 nights situation a little bit more possible, too. That's just a lot of back-to-backs. Tyrese Halliburton, let's get into some player reaction. He doesn't like the 65-game rule. The Pacers' all-star point guard, according to The Athletic, called it a stupid rule and said he returned early from an injury to remain eligible this season for the All-NBA team. But it's not because he wanted to just be on the All-NBA team. It's because that would earn him another $41 million on his contract. There are stipulations for players in their contracts, incentives, awards, and recognition. That's not just for getting the trophy and holding it up. It's money for the players that they're now no longer eligible for if they don't play 65 games at a minimum. So that comes to us from The Athletic. There's also the side of the NBA Players Association. Their vice president of the executive committee, Grant Williams, said this, quote, "You never want to mess up someone's health or risk their health. You never want to risk their finances either. So it's difficult. It's a difficult rule and something that I feel like was inspired by competition, and we just have to look at it again and try and see what we can converse and come up with." And that's totally understandable. This is the first go-around of it. Will the number change? Will the rule change? Will it go from 65 to 60? Is that more fair? Is there even a number that's fair? Is it 55? There's 2 questions here. Is the idea of this fair? And is 65 the right number for this? The NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said this, quote, "I can tell you that the number of games that players have participated in is up this season. And interestingly enough, injuries are actually down. Whether that's meaningful data yet, I don't know. I think the right time to take a further look at this rule is at the end of the season when we see sort of at least have a year under our belt." Totally agree. Everybody's understanding that this is experimental, and so long that they're not tied into this forever, that's a better idea. Although, again, it's going to cost some people some money and some opportunities. Joel Embiid, he's already missed 18 or more games. Again, you can miss 17. You can't miss 18 to get to 65. Embiid up for the MVP, the Defensive Player of the Year, the All-NBA, and the All-Defensive teams, not eligible. Kyrie Irving, not eligible. Jimmy Butler, not eligible. Draymond Green, not eligible. So it's that magic number of 17 versus 18, and at 18, you're disqualified. Now, were all of these players going to earn all of those honors? No, but some, maybe, yeah, sure, under optimal circumstances. And don't get me wrong, an injury itself can take away from your chance of getting on any one of those teams. If you're playing hurt, you're not able to play as many games, of course. Sometimes the popularity contest and your reputation will still get you those awards, but some years you just don't play enough and you're not in the spotlight and you don't win anyway. But now we're putting a precise number on a threshold that you need to meet as a player. Let's go back to load management here for just a second. How do other sports do this? Is this a basketball problem? In Major League Baseball, it's pretty common for top players, everyday players, star players to take a Sunday off. And that's usually because it's a Friday night game, a quick turnaround on a Saturday day game. So Sunday, if you can get that rest, and it's once a week, and maybe a Monday you have off too, you do it in tandem, you get 2 days off. A lot of managers will do that for their veteran players, give them a Sunday off. It happens in baseball, but only in once, like a week. You're playing every day, right? And you're playing a series. So that player has probably already played, a position player, 2 games against the opposing team, and they're going to get one of them off, 1 per week maybe. Obviously, this doesn't apply to pitchers. It's position players only. In football, it's not applicable. As long as you can play, you're going to play. Maybe with the rare exception that if a team has already clinched a playoff spot, it's one of the last few weeks of the regular season, things don't matter, they might get a week off. But again, even that is pretty rare. So football, load management, is not applicable. In hockey, in the NHL, it's not acceptable. And I'm not saying that's the right answer either. Players will try and play through separated shoulders and broken bones and head injuries, concussions. Hockey, that culture has an interesting, I'll call it situation, in that players are trying to do too much through injuries. It's the exact opposite of load management. They never get that situation. They might have a practice or a morning skate off, but never a game. If they have a pulse and they're able to stand, they will play. That's just the way hockey culture goes. And then there's the NBA, which recently did, I think this was late last year, a 57-page report on the effects of load management, and does it actually still provide a benefit based on science. The 57-page report did say this: between the 1990s to today, the average number of games missed per season by those defined as star players, and I don't know what the definition is, but star players from the 90s to today, the amount of games they missed per season rose considerably. In the 90s, it was 10.6 games per season. Makes sense. In the 2020s, it's more than double. 23.9, essentially 24 games missed per season by star players across the league. That's a quarter of the season, right? That's more than a quarter of the season. And so it's significant to try and figure out how to cut down on that, how to keep players healthy so that they're not put in this situation. I mentioned that study released by the NBA in late 2023. It said essentially that load management benefits, they're no longer supported by scientific data. So they're not agreeing that load management has the effect that's even desired anymore. Again, that's the NBA's perspective here. They also said they wanted to regain a culture where the players wanted to be and play in all 82 games. Now, that's an interesting dynamic too. Do they not want to play? Are they trying to miss these games on purpose? Is this, and I'll get to it in my takeaways, is this more of a statement or a preventative thing about the amount of games? And how about this stat? Of the NBA's top 50 scorers last season, top 50, right? Only a dozen played 70 games or more. And 70 was the threshold of the 90s, right? Superstars played 72 games about. So that's of the top 50 scorers, only a dozen got to 70 games. All right, here are my takeaways. The NBA says there's not proven benefits of load management. I'm just not sure what you're trying to really accomplish here. If you're telling me that a player's going to miss one game on a Thursday night, and because of it, they're going to get to play 5 more games for the course of the season, or they'll be healthy enough, or that really is the trade-off, I'm good with that, right? Because that's going to keep you in the lineup longer. I just don't know, though, if we're ever going to have proof that taking that one game or night off is actually going to have a meaningful impact. The player might say that it will, but how can we actually prove it? Until that's the case, I don't know how many people are going to buy into load management from the outside looking in. And again, that's because probably neither I have ever played in the NBA, so we can't really put our feet in their shoes. We really don't understand, but from our perspective, it's going to be hard to buy into that unless there's tangible proof. Again, is this prevention of injuries? Is that the situation here, or is this trying to help ailing players get through situations, trying to increase their recovery period? Or is this a player statement and the inconvenience of the schedule? And I mentioned that the Warriors with 17 back-to-backs this year. Is this players ahead of time, like a month ahead of time, when they're healthy, saying, you know what, when we get to that point in the schedule, I'm taking a break. Like in the same way that I might schedule a vacation and look at when games are and what games I can miss and when's a good time to take a break, maybe a veteran star player is doing that in the NBA. Does it really have to do with that game, that night, that moment, that situation, or is this planned in advance because a player just says, that's when it's best for me to go a little bit easier? Should the NBA just revisit the schedule? Less games, spread out the season longer, whatever you can do. Did the in-season tournament take up too much time this year? Is that why we have so many back-to-backs? Maybe the NBA can rework this so that players don't feel like they have to do load management as much. Can fans and TV networks get upset about scratches, players not participating at the last minute? I suppose they're obviously getting their voice heard here. Like the NBA is literally saying, We're not going to give you awards and money because of it if you don't play in 65 games. That could be in all their individual contracts. But it's not. Instead, it's a part of the CBA, which encompasses everybody's contract and everybody's situation. Maybe there should be a threshold of contract, and if you make a certain dollar amount or whatever it is, that maybe that puts you in the got to play this many games category, or maybe it's more incentive-based. I'm getting way off the rails here, but it's interesting that the networks and the fans have had this much influence to impact a rule, which then goes back and impacts the players, what they make, and the awards they can and cannot receive. And that's the point here. The awards are kind of the placeholder here. Don't get it twisted what the players are really interested in. Money and what comes from winning an award. Contractual incentives. I don't think this has to do with how many trophies end up on a player's mantle at the end of their career. They'll take pride in that, no doubt. But the biggest thing we're talking about here is money. And what networks and ratings are, networks are and are not getting in ratings, and what fans are and are not paying in ticket prices, and matchups that are and are not happening, that's what all of this is about here. So from the player perspective and the 65-game rule, it's less about the actual trophies being awarded, and it's very much about the dollar amounts that come with it. You made it here to the end of the video. You know I appreciate that. Thumbs up down below. That'll greatly help me in this channel. And by the way, if you're just seeing me for the first time, you stumbled across this channel, that's awesome. I really appreciate it. I'm happy you're here. But quick, do me a favor before the end of this video, before you go, hit the subscribe button down below so I can definitely see you back here next time.